Welcome back to the shop, everyone. Today's video takes place in week 6 of 2023, February 6th to February 12th. And we are going to kick this off by me opening a part that I have been wanting and needing for a couple of years. So this car was actually in an accident I don't even know, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And it was hitting the back left quarter. And when it was fixed, they never replaced it with the right part. For a Capri, it was replaced with a Mustang part. And so now I finally got the right Capri part, and I am super pumped for that, that I get to put the actual Capri part back onto this. So now that I've checked that out, I'm going to start pulling this front end back apart. Now that the tubes have been tacked on, I have tested mocking up the entire front end. I'm going to prep the tubes for cleaning, and then I'm going to get all of the gear ready for welding. So I'm going to switch the consumables around on the torch, and then I'm going to weld the tubes on this front end. yeah, fortunately, no surprises in the welding. Everything went pretty smoothly. You know, I think everything's still all lined up just how I want it. And now I'm going to reinstall the procharger now that I can. Yeah, it obviously that's exactly what I needed. That's exactly what I wanted. The procharger clears the front end. I love it when something that I planned actually works out exactly as I need. It's nice. It's, you know, something you just want to step back and look at. Now the procharger's back on. I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup before I start on the next job. Before we start on the next job, now that cleanup's done, take a look at my brand new hat. I love this thing. It says the Annihilator Racing. It's mine. I love it. So now I'm going to start installing the brackets for the AC. So I had these water jetted, and so now I'm going to start installing them. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to take the procharger bracket off, and then that'll allow me to remove the air compressor. So just like I was doing with the 3D printed bracket, installing it on behind the AC compressor bracket with bolts coming forward. This is just kind of a quick test fit just to see if it's gonna line up and work. Trying to be mindful of the angles and give you guys better shots. The problem is when I try and give you guys a better shot, like if you're over my shoulder or something, sometimes I just get in the way. But I'm doing my best. Give it a little bit more time and hopefully I'll be able to nail it, you know, 90% of the time. Yeah, so with those two brackets just on the air compressor brackets, everything is looking okay at the moment. It's, you know, kind of what I did. Well, it's not kind of what I designed. It's exactly what I designed. Just adding a bunch of washers and there are spacers. Before I do the final install, I will get a chunk of steel and I will make proper length spacers for the front and the back. But for now, you know, for mock-up, using whatever you got around is totally cool. Yeah, look at that. That sand-in pump is installed. It's, you know, from my eyes, it looks really good. What I'm doing here is I'm throwing my digital level on each of the pulleys. I just want to make sure that none of the accessories are excessively tilted forward or back from one another, because that would cause, you know, belts to slip or, you know, cause you to throw belts. I think all of my accessories were within a half of a degree from one another, so that's gonna work just fine, I think. What I was doing there with the marker is I was marking where I need to drill through the AC bracket to mount that solidly. And before I continue working on that, I want to just tape over the inlet and the outlet of the procharger. You know, if I'm drilling and grinding and cutting, I don't want any material getting into either of the ports on that unit. That would just be a horrible thing. So I'm just making sure I tape it up nicely, and so it's nice and covered, and I don't really risk getting anything in there. I really should have done that a long time ago, like, you know, as soon as I first got it, but, you know, better late than never, I suppose. Now that I have the AC compressor in, I can start looking at any other modifications I may need to do to this bracket to get it to all fit. When I had the 3D printed model, I knew it wasn't going to be perfect. I figured there was still going to be some modification needed, and that is the case. What I'm doing is I'm just trying to figure out what the best way to go about this is. Is it modify the bracket a bunch? Is it make some new compressor brackets? And, you know, I'm trying to assess where it's going to be best to have this compressor situated. And in my mind right now, I need to roll the compressor a little bit. So right now, if you looked at any of the brackets, it's the exact same distance from the bottom holes to the top two holes. And so I think what I want to do is make it so that the hole on the right is higher. So I'm going to tilt that away. Up and left essentially from the hole now, while keeping the right hole exactly where it is, and that'll have the compressor just roll up a little bit. I think I end up making it so that it's about 3/8 of an inch higher, maybe ½ inch, I don't remember. I could go back and look it up. Maybe I'll do that actually. So yeah, I'm now just shy of 5/16 of an inch higher on one side than I am the other. And since I'm realizing the brackets as designed aren't going to work, I have decided to stop working on that, and I am going to just unwrap some of this things for my dash. This is a new dashboard, and the reason why I had it recut is that some of the dimensions are smaller to fit inside the dash a lot nicer. So I have this backboard, which is going to sit underneath all of my gauges. So this will be where I do wiring, and then obviously that's where my gauges are going to sit, my dash vent, and then my heater controls, some warning lights. So I was just checking that out. And now I am back on the procharger bracket, back on the AC brackets. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to modify the procharger bracket so that I don't need to cut out new brackets. I do end up cutting out new brackets, but at this exact point in time, I don't want to wait 2 more weeks for water jetted brackets. I want to see if I can make what I have work. So on the back side of this bracket, you can kind of see that the procharger bracket is over top of the AC bracket. So that's what I was just marking out there with Sharpie is, mark the entire opening of the air compressor hole bracket on the back of the bracket, and then I can open it up a bit. But as I mentioned way earlier, I actually decided to redo the brackets and roll the procharger or roll the AC compressor up so that it fits a little bit nicer. So this is the first paper design. Didn't like it, so I reiterate on this 3 or 4 times, just testing out different positions for the brackets. I don't know if you remember, but way back when I first started working on the compressor brackets, I had like a V2 of the bracket, which had one of the ears kind of poking out above the bracket, and I didn't like. So I need to keep that in mind while I'm doing this setup. Yeah, I went through and redesigned this 3 or 4 times. Maybe even 5. I don't really remember, but it's just an iterative process. Design on the computer, print it out, cut it out, come back to the car, get it mounted between the existing bracket, and kind of get the compressor loosely fit in. Now that I have a paper template that I'm kind of happy with, I want to throw the compressor in there with the procharger bracket and just kind of eyeball this and just see if it's going to work at all. I'm just using this super long bolt just kind of hold the procharger bracket more or less in place. It's not perfect, but it gives me a rough idea where things are going to line up. So before continuing on, just give you a quick shot of this current design, and we're gonna iterate on to the next design. Well, I have my final design. This is what I'm going with. And I decided instead of waiting for 2 weeks for the design to be water jetted, I'm going to fab these myself. So I just cut out a fresh template or printed out a fresh template. I'm going to cut it out. And then I'm going to start fabbing these myself. I'm not going to wait. I'm just going to do it and we'll see if it turns out. If I waste a couple of hours, then, I'd rather waste a couple hours, fail, and then have to send it off and wait a couple of weeks versus not even trying in the first place. So before we start fabbing, let's just put the procharger away. I need the fab table. And then we are going to select some steel and we are going to start building these. Yeah, so I don't think there's all that much to say about this. I'm going to trace out the design on the steel. I'm going to do a rough cut, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld the two pieces together. And with the two pieces welded together, I can take it over to the grinders, to the bench grinder. It's my belt sander. Clean it all up. And the reason why I just tack the two pieces together, and the reason why I do that is when I go over to the belt sander, I can make sure that both pieces look identical. And then when I drill the holes in them, I center punch on the top, and I drill the holes in the exact same place in both. And that's going to allow the mount to be set up in the exact same place on the front and the back. So yeah, that's the plan. So enjoy. Getting into some of those tight corners was just not really attainable with the 5-inch grinding disc on the grinder. So I'm switching over to the air wheel with a 3-inch disc. But I'm running into some issues with this die grinder. What's happening is the head is like disconnecting from the body, so it's not spinning anymore. So I'm seeing some water coming out of the air tool, so I figure I'll swap out the desiccant and see if that fixes anything. It didn't, the tool's just broken. So what I'm doing here is I'm just switching the cutting disc and getting a smaller cutting disc and swapping it over to my other die grinder, and we'll continue working. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I'm wrong. I started out using my Blue Point die grinder, and for some reason the Blue Point just never seems to spin up as well as this Mastercraft. But now you can see I'm trying to cut and I'm having a hell of a time, and it's actually this Mastercraft die grinder that dies. So I actually swapped back over to the Blue Point, which I was originally using just to finish off these cuts. Yeah, breaking tools is part of building cars. Fortunately, the tool that I broke was a Canadian Tire Special, and they are really good with their warranty. They had a 3-year warranty on the air tool, and I took it in. I didn't have a receipt, but it was a Mastercraft, and they honored the warranty. They gave me a new one, no questions asked, which was awesome. I've had great dealings with Canadian Tire, but the problem is their tools don't usually last as long. Now, that being said, that grinder on the bench, that's a Mastercraft, and I've had that for 5 years, and I've beat the shit out of it. I've cut a shit ton of quarter-inch plate with it, and it just keeps on going. So yeah, so this is where I'm just tacking the pieces together, like I mentioned earlier. That's just so when I take it over to the belt sander and when I drill the holes through it, they are all done in the same place. But yeah, to get back to tools, for some things you can cheap out on, and some things it's just not worth it. If it's something that you're going to be using all the time, I think the general rule of thumb is buy the cheap one, and then if you break it and because you're using it all the time, buy the expensive one. Yeah, so we're just going to get into a little bit of cleanup while the parts cool down, and then we are going to continue fabbing on the brackets after I've gone on this little bit of a tangent. Alright, we got carburetor in the shop with us while I set up the new die grinder that Canadian Tire warrantied. So just going through, quickly reading the manual. I mean, it's pretty simple. Attach the air inlet, oil it before use. But one interesting thing is, I looked in the air inlet and there was actually a chunk of metal just sitting on top of the screen, so you'll see that I actually fished that out. But yeah, again, super happy with Canadian Tire and the fact that they warranted that. They didn't have to. I mean, I even told them, I said, listen, I think I'm probably outside the 3 years. I have had this for a while, so I fully understand if you don't warranty it. But they said, no problem, we'll warranty it. And so I bought another one at that time, and then I think I bought another one as well. Yeah, I like to support companies that treat me well. What I was doing there is there's a air valve, so I was just adjusting it to fully open, and then I'm also doing the same thing on my Blue Point one because I never realized how to adjust it before, so I just wanted to make sure they're both fully open and spinning as much as they can. And now that I got that tool set up, let's get back onto fabricating this bracket. So I just traced out the pattern on the metal, and now I can take it over to the belt sander and sand it down. So now that I've done as much as I can with the belt sander on the outside edges, I'm going to take my regular grinder with a flat disc and start cleaning up the inside edges. Now that I have all of the outside inside edges cleaned up, I'm taping the pattern down to the top, and the reason why I'm doing that is because I need to center punch the 4 holes that I'm going to drill out, and I absolutely do not want the pattern moving, so tape it down between the holes. That way the holes are lined up exactly as I've drawn them out in CAD. Drilling these holes out is largely uneventful, but when I do punch through the bottom, it leaves a bit of a burr, which makes it so that the pieces don't sit flat on the table. So after I drill through, I just take it over to the belt sander and just sand the back of it flat so that the 2 pieces sit flat on the table. Working on that far corner of the shop is always messy. The drill throws so much chips, same with the sander, so I kind of like to clean it up because it is a huge mess and I don't want to track it all throughout the shop. Alright, here's the first look at my built brackets. So you can see they're pretty much identical to the template. And so now what I need to do is with the cutoff wheel, I need to break those tacks and then separate them, separate the two pieces. This was actually a lot more effort than it should have been. I should have cut into the tacks quite a bit deeper, but I didn't want to cut too deep, so I ended up just kind of dicking around with the chisel trying to get it open, but then I ended up needing to cut the metal more, and then I was finally able to get them separated. Alright, so now that we have spent that time fabbing up the brackets, we can take the old ones that I'm not going to use off, and then we can install the new ones and see if this is going to work. I really hope that it does, otherwise this is like, what, 2-3 hours of work down the drain. So let's see, I guess. Again, I'm just using washers as spacers. Getting you a better angle while I'm installing the bolts in the back. I'm doing my best to get you guys angles of what I'm working on. It's getting there, slowly but surely. So, moment of truth. Fed up with the procharger, and this is looking way better. I don't know how well you could see from that last angle, but most of the bracket cleared all of the ears and stuff, so it's looking so much better. Yeah, like right there. You can see that the procharger bracket is up against the AC bracket. It's a little tight in there, but it fits. And I didn't have to hack up the procharger bracket anymore, which is nice. Alright, if you think back to where I was like sharpieing on the back of the procharger bracket, okay, I need to, you know, take all this more material off, and I don't need to. All I need to do is right on the bottom between the two bolts. It's not flat, so all I'm going to do is take a flap disc and I'm going to make it a little bit more flat, a little bit more straight, and that's all it's needed. Sorry, it's at the top there between those two. Oh no, those are the bottom bolts. Kind of top on the screen, but no, that's the bottom of the procharger bracket, and I just made that flat across. And yeah, when I'm using the flap disc on this aluminum, it throws aluminum shards just absolutely everywhere. But yeah, so look how nice that fits in there. That is mighty, mighty nice. You know, looking back, I didn't have to take quite such a large chunk out of the right side of the procharger for the air compressor ear. But live and learn. Since that's on, we can clean up the shop and get ready to keep on keeping on, I guess. Alright, now that we've done some cleanup, what we're going to do is we are going to drill the 2 needed holes in the air compressor bracket. So in those 2 holes that are needed is, you can see it on the left side where I'm center punching right now, and right through the bottom of that air compressor ear. On the back side of that is the AC bracket that I just built. So I need to drill those 2 holes, bolt it up, and then compressor is installed. Procharger bracket is well, not fully installed, but in place, and it's all going to work very nicely. So the holes that I drilled are either too small or just like dead on the perfect height. So I'm like, oh, I'll try and hammer a bolt through, and yeah, it just didn't work. So I need to step up the size of that hole 1 number. Yeah, I can't quite get the washer on with that because all the burrs from drilling through. So I'm just being real lazy, just taking a chisel and a hammer and just knocking some of the burrs off. So look how good that is. You know, that's lined up so perfectly well that the bolt just comes straight through. No questions asked. It's so nice. Now that I have the compressor installed, I got my power steering installed, I got my alternator on, I got the crank pulley on, I just want to give the belt a quick check just to make sure that things look like they're going to line up and work out as I expect, and I think it's all going to work just fine. Alright, so now we can get on to reinstalling the procharger tensioner. In order to do that, I need to pull out the stud that's holding on the power steering bracket. The procharger kit comes with a longer bolt. It'll go, so the tensioner is spaced off of that bracket a little bit if I recall correctly. So it comes with a little spacer and yeah. And after looking at it, that is actually not where the procharger tensioner mounts to. So I can put that stud back into place because that will be used as is. But of course, getting the stud out was a lot easier than putting it back in, and I give you a terrible view of what we're doing here. But yeah, that stud's fighting me. It doesn't want to go back in. So what I end up having to do is, if I recall correctly, I loosen off the AC bracket and then I can wiggle it back in. So yeah, this stud goes through the air compressor bracket, through the power steering pump bracket, through the AC bracket, through the engine plate into the head. So it's got a lot of steps got to go, and if any of those have come out of angle, it's a bit of a pain in the butt to get it back in. But yeah, so we finally get that back in, and we can put the nut back on, hold it down. So you could kind of see in that previous shot and this shot, just on the left side of the power steering pulley, there's another bolt there. That's one I'm about to undo, and that's the one that the procharger tensioner actually uses. So I need to pull that out, and then there's going to be a spacer that goes between the tensioner and that bracket, and then goes all the way into the head. Yeah, so you can see I'm putting the spacer in there. Bolt goes in, and that will hold that down. On the top side, we've got a little spacer, bracket, or spacer, and then bolt, and then bracket. And then on the bottom side is, I don't remember, it might just be a bolt straight in. Yeah, that's right. The very bottom left bolt, you can't see it here. It's kind of stepped down, and it just sits right up against the air compressor bracket, and I think it's actually a stud that comes off, and so there's just a nut on the bottom. Yeah, I'm just so happy that the tensioner is installed now. So we're going to reinstall the procharger, and we're going to see if we can, figure out how to get the belt on there. Part of the problem is I'm dumb and I haven't read the instructions, so I don't actually know how that tensioner works and what I'm supposed to do with it. I've since watched a video and learned more about it, but yeah, just know that everything I'm doing right now is kind of wrong, so ignore what I'm doing. Just know that I'm going into this without any understanding of what I'm doing. So yeah, now I decided to get smart and see about reading the instructions on how to install this. I know I didn't even get it right when I got to this point, but yeah, so since I couldn't get the belt on, I figured, well, I know there's a bracket, this bracket that needs to go on. It attaches from the lower air conditioning bracket bolt to the procharger, and that's just to give it a lot of stability. And if you remember from an earlier video, I mentioned that I flipped the AC compressor bracket around. That's what I saw another person do when installing the stand-in pump on the foxbody, but that's not going to work with the procharger. You can kind of see from that shot that with that flipped around, the bracket there actually hits the AC compressor brackets, and that's just not going to work. So what are my options? I can cut the bracket, the AC compressor bracket, the black one there, or I can flip it back around. So that's what I'm going to try. I'm going to flip it back around and see if I can still get this pump installed. All right, so you can see now that I've got that flipped back around, it looks, it looks like this is going to install just fine. Kind of messing around with it because it's not lining up quite flush. So since it didn't line up quite flush, I'm going to off camera go and find some YouTube videos and see if maybe I'm doing something wrong. But yeah, I'm just back to dicking around with the belt, and I eventually I think I had gotten it to a point where I was happy with it, and I knew I could get it on the car, so throw it back in the box. And I'm just opening up the bracket to see if there's any instructions that came with it, and I'm back to looking at how to install this and just kind of looking at all the different angles. So, as I was reading the instructions, I figured out why the bolt that came with the tensioner and the little spacer wasn't long enough. And that's because you're supposed to put the spacer on behind that little, well, not a little, but that 3/8 like long nut. So I was putting it on the front side, but yeah, it just goes on the back like that, and then you screw the nut in, and then that's how the tensioner is spaced, and then the 3/8 bolt they provide is more than long enough. So read the instructions. They're there for a reason. The people who wrote the instructions, presumably installed this on the car once or twice and know a lot more about what's going on than I do. Here we go. Now we got their nice stainless steel bolt in there. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling this tensioner off, and the reason why I'm pulling that off is because I'm trying to see if there's a different way to angle this tensioner, and the main reason is when I'm kind of loosening tension off of it, it's hitting the water pump. And so I've noticed that there's a few different ways you can orient the tensioner, so I'm just trying a different way to see if that'll work better. So we see here when I try a different orientation, it's hitting the power steering pump. So the long and short of it was, no, there is no other way to orientate the pulley. It has to be the way that it came. Well, I am determined to get this belt on, so kind of get it on there, and then I grab a ratchet and I start kind of walking the belt around the pulley. After fighting with this, I got it to a point where it's almost fully on, and then I said, nope, I'm not going to put it all the way on, because I know I have to take this all back apart anyway, so there's no point in wasting my time, putting it fully on there just to have to pull it all right back off. So I do know that I'm going to have to do more work on that just to make sure I'm setting up the pulley correctly. But long story short, I know I can get the belt on there when I get to that point. Back into some cleanup. Alright, we are back to my favorite thing in the world, and that is wiring. Right now we are going to start some work on I think we're going to do a little bit of work on the coil wiring on the passenger side here. So looks like what I'm grabbing there is a Deutsch connector, and the reason why I'm grabbing that is I want to replace the stock connector with a Deutsch connector. But what I noticed before is when I pulled the coils off, I couldn't easily disconnect it from the chassis wiring. So what I need to do is I'm going to put in a 4-pin DTP Deutsch connector on the power, the head ground, and the ground wire. That way I'll be able to undo the power wires, undo the coil wires, and I'll be able to take it out without having to pull the wiring out of the car. Some tape. I have found some wires that match the colors of the wires coming from the ECU up to the firewall. I don't know if any of you remember, but when I initially did this wiring harness, the wires that I had come up to the firewall were too short to get to the coils. So luckily I have enough other wires from like the input harness and the output harness that, you know, I was able to match them up pretty similarly. So I've just added those in. I'm taping them up now. And I guess when I grab that Deutsch DTP4 connector, I'm not doing anything with it at this exact moment. I'm going to instead tape the wires. Now that everything is all taped together, I'm going to get these fastened to the bars. How I'm going to run them, you know, this will be how I run these up to the bulkhead connector. Alright, so we just cut those to length. We know that I got enough wire that I can get that into the connector. Just kind of wrap up the other wires and throw them back on the shelf. So what I'm doing now is I'm grabbing one of my front rims, and the reason why I'm getting one of these rims out is I want to make sure that where I have the coils now, that the tire isn't going to interfere with any of the wiring. You know, it'd be pretty crappy if when I get this on there and I put the rim on there and I put the tire on there that, you know, I turn it and it's like hitting the coils. That would be really bad. So I just want to do a little bit of pre-checking just to make sure that I'll have enough space. I don't know if I've said this before, but god damn, I love the way that rim looks on there. I love the way the brake rotor fills the entire thing. Yeah, that is just super duper sexy in my opinion. I love it. Yeah, look at that big caliper in there, big rotor. Oh man, that is just so nice. Gets me excited seeing that on there. And now that we've done our checking, we can pull the rim back off, throw it back in the box, put it away. Alright, so now that we have finished that little mini test, we can get back onto our wiring. So grabbing the Deutsch crimper, and we are going to start crimping some wires. So when when I'm installing the some of the smaller gauge wires, like the 22 gauge and the 20 gauge wires into that connector, the wire is so flimsy that I can't push the crimped end all the way in. So I have to use the depenning tool and kind of help it in. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, so long as you don't turn the depenning tool, which I did before and I fucked up one of the pins. right there is already starting to look real nice. It's coming together just perfectly. So what I have now is I have a couple of ground wires coming here. I think that is possibly my water pump and my air conditioning compressor. So I'm just putting some ends on that. Or one of those might even be the ground for the coils. Alright, so what I'm going to start on now is I want to kind of get the wires in place. So I'm drilling a hole in the sheet metal and I'm going to install a riv nut and then a stainless steel nut just to hold it together. So I think the hole for the riv nut was a little big, and then I torqued down on it a little too much, because when I was installing this stainless steel bolt, it didn't tighten down very well, and then I couldn't get it out, and it ends up actually, I broke the end of my Allen key, and I end up breaking the stainless steel bolts, and all in all, it was just a really terrible time. Even right now, that bolt is stuck in there, and like it broke off in half, so there's still half of it sitting in the car. I grabbed some pliers and I kind of force it out, and as I'm working this back out, yeah, it just snaps on me. I think I actually end up having to switch over to vice grips because even these pliers just not moving it. Yeah, this sucks. I don't know why I had this problem with the stainless steel riv nut and the stainless steel bolt. I have done some reading since, and apparently stainless steel is real easy to gall, and then it kind of cold welds itself together. So, maybe that's what happened. Maybe when I was doing the riv nut, I just put too much pressure on it and kind of distorted the threads. I'm not sure. But I do know that I'm really unhappy with the whole situation. I'm gonna have to drill that stainless steel bolt out and probably weld that, and then maybe try again. So I was trying to see if I could just punch it through the riv nut, but yeah, it's just stuck in there. So I just said, screw it, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I've been fighting with it for like 5 minutes, and I don't feel like fighting with it anymore. What I am doing, however, is I'm going to remove the through panel connector. And the reason why I'm doing that is I realized something while I was kind of going through this. I don't know, you may remember when I was doing some of the engine wiring, I ended up feeding all of the wiring through the firewall and pulling it back. And the reason why is because when I drilled the hole for the firewall, I didn't drill it out big enough. So I drilled out the hole big enough for just the end of this connector to go through, but in reality I needed it to be much bigger, because what should happen is you should be able to undo the big nut on the front, and then the whole connector falls through the other side. Because I never had the hole drilled out big enough, that didn't happen. So this is what I'm doing right now. I'm going through, I'm using a die grinder, and I am opening up that hole so that when the wires are pinned, I can just pull the whole connector out without having to de-pin everything. So I'm just doing a little bit of checking to see if that hole's big enough for the whole connector to come through after I undo that nut. And looking on the back side, it's not big enough yet, so I'll need to enlarge it a bit more. I mean, thinking back on this, what I really should have done is just like printed out a circle and then traced it out and then cut back to my Sharpie mark instead of just kind of freehanding it like it is now. As you can see, it's not really a circle, it's kind of just oblong jank. But I mean, as long as I'm not cutting in like so much that you can't or that like I'm outside of the bounds of the cover. It's all right. It's just not perfect. So now that I have this at a spot where I can undo that nut on the front, and then I can just push that connector back, I can do some cleaning up and start working on the next part. So I don't remember what I was gonna start on or what I was gonna try and do, but what I am doing right now is I'm removing the engine ground and kind of getting it just out of the way. Oh, right. I was removing that ground because I was going to try and get the passenger side header installed. Now I know from trying to install it before, it doesn't quite fit. So I'm just trying to see what I need to do or what I need to try and do to get it in there. And as you can see, there's that part of the cross member right on the corner where it's hitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a grinder and just knock out the corner chunk and see if I can kind of get it into position, because it's definitely hitting when I try and get it in. So even with that corner knocked out, it's still just not going to sit in there nicely. So I think what I'll end up having to do is probably raise the engine, or I know sometimes you can install it from below the car, like from the bottom up. I think some people might sit the header like kind of in the cross member and then drop the engine in and then bolt the headers up. But I'm gonna have to kind of play with it and see. And while I was trying to get the header on, you can see the fuel lines are kind of right in the way, so I got distracted. So I am now moving over to the fuel lines, because having them running on the inside of the trans tunnel and up the inside, it's just not going to work for me. There's not enough clearance. I need to get a mount in there for the mid plate still. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull these lines back through, and I'm going to run them on the outside of the frame rail, up the inside of the wheel well, and then into the engine bay. It's kind of the way Ford had them run from the factory, so I'm not too concerned about them being in the very back corner of the wheel well. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this here. Those two fuel lines are just going to run up the inside of the wheel well. So I'm just grabbing down all of my fuel line fittings and the fuel line related box. So that right there is my fuel pressure regulator, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and figure out the best placement for it. So one of the things is, do I want to put this, on the shock tower? Do I want to put it on the firewall? Do I want to try and mount it directly to the intake? So that's what I'm going to kind of start working on now and try and figure that out. So I'm just working on getting some of the fittings I think will be needed and attaching them onto the fuel pressure regulator. So the inlet side of this is -8's orb, and then I'm putting some -8 fittings on it just to kind of figure out the overall width of this and where it may and may not fit. So yeah, with the fuel pressure regulator with a couple of 90s, I can't really fit it in that little area at all. So I'm kind of thinking at this point, maybe on the firewall. I don't like it that low. I don't like it in the back there. It's inaccessible. And I've seen some where guys will build some lines and they will just kind of have it hanging off of the front of the two fuel rails. So I'm just grabbing some fittings and trying to see if I can make that work. for the terrible angle here. So after all that, fuel pressure regulator is not going to sit nicely between the two fuel rails. You know, maybe if I bought a bunch of special fittings or like short fittings, maybe I could make it work. But with the fittings as it is, it just wasn't going to work out. So I'm just building a list of fuel fittings I think I'm going to need in order to actually do this. And I think I've settled on installing it on the back firewall. Yeah, so I'm just writing down a list of a bunch of stuff that I need to buy to make this all work. Alright, well, since I am waiting for fuel fittings, I'm going to start on doing the Deutsch HD30 through panel connector on the driver's side. So this is going to be powering stuff like my line lock, headlights, so that's my low beam, my high beam. I'm going to have my turn signals come through here. I'm going to have my park lights come through here. coil wires for the driver's side, coil power for the driver's side. My horn will come through this side. All of my windshield wiper controls will come through this side. So I need to, install the connector on this side, similar to this side, just do it on this side. But that's a pretty big hole, and there's no way that my hole size is gonna ever be centered on there. So I'm not quite sure what I'm gonna do here. So yeah, that's where I want this to sit, on this side. So I'm just marking out the holes. Before I start working on that side, I'm going to pull the dash back out, I believe. And the reason why is that'll just give me easier access on the back side for when I start trying to do this wiring. Okay, so I'm not pulling the dash fully out, I'm just kind of resting it down on the car, but that does give me access in there. And so, okay, so what I'm doing is I'm taping a piece of cardboard to the firewall. And the reason why I'm doing that is to make a template so I can fill that hole there with a piece of sheet metal. And so I just needed that cardboard taped up, so yeah, I can draw out the template. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make the template, clean up the hole, and weld that panel in there. Alright, well, since you guys have seen me do a bunch of fab work before, I didn't really think I needed to talk too much, but it's done. You may notice that I didn't completely weld 100% the entire way around, and that's because I know I'm about to cut some of that metal right back out. Yeah, sometimes you gotta put metal in order to take it out. Just the way it goes. So there's the paper template, and what I'm doing is I'm just center punching, and I am center punching the 4 mount holes. I really probably should have taped that up so it didn't move at all, but such is life. So I'm just selecting a hole saw that I think is going to work, and I am putting that hole straight through the, well, I guess it's kind of technically the firewall. So I did not have a hole saw that was the exact right size. So what I'm doing is I'm using this drum sanding wheel on the on my drill and just opening up that hole that last little bit. And now the connector fits in there wonderfully. Now I'm going to work on drilling out the mounting holes. after a little bit of cleanup, that is all that we have in this video. So if you've stuck around this long, as always, I'd like to thank you for viewing, and we'll see you in the next one.